Mr. Smith is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our entire panel here, and certainly to my colleagues. Many of us have been working on this issue for some time. I really appreciate the efforts that so many are making. I don't want to just say have made, but are making because of the importance of this issue. I know that the GAO has released a preliminary observation finding 155 unresolved TANF audit findings spanning 35 states in 2023 alone, most of which were found to be severe and outstanding. I would like to submit this for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. When we talk about temporary assistance for needy families, I like to point out to anyone who will listen that these funds are intended for the neediest among us, and that we want to make a difference. That these taxpayer dollars that come from all over the country, obviously, are intended to help lift people out of poverty. So when I hear and read about various things, I'm concerned. I think Mr. Dortch, you mentioned, I think it was your comments that included that someone said that we don't track the outcomes. That's tragic in and of itself. I think it's important that the federal government not become overly prescriptive of various state governments, but we need to have the expectation that positive things are happening. And I realize that we want to encourage creativity among the states, but wow, the creativity that we've seen, whether it's in Mississippi or elsewhere, like I said, there are many states that have gotten, I think, a little too clever. But the efforts to cap beneficiaries, I should say, at 200% of federal poverty and below, I know the administration is looking at creating a rule as such. I've been working on this legislatively for some time, and I would certainly invite colleagues to join in this effort because I think it really helps. It's not the full answer, but it helps target the funds to folks who need it the most. But Mr. Favre, I have a few questions here. When you were initially approached at helping promote various efforts, how was it characterized that these funds, where was it characterized these funds were coming from?
My understanding was it was grants that this particular lady had been writing grants for 35 years in the state. And the university introduced me to her and her nonprofit. And surprisingly, she was actually a Southern Miss grad and was on the athletic board, but I'd never met her before. Again, as I said earlier, never was TANF or welfare funds mentioned in any conversation.
Were public funds mentioned? Or was it your understanding that they were private funds from a wealthy individual or some source?
I don't recall. I just remember that grant money.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, I think that your presence here today is helpful so that we can work together to prevent similar situations from happening. But I am just extremely concerned that the lack of expectations that currently exist, that these taxpayer dollars intended for the neediest among us are not helping the people that they are intended to help. Mr. Adolphson, could you speak a little bit to how maybe limiting the beneficiaries to 200% of federal poverty and below could help us in our effort?
Sure, Representative, thank you for the question. And just to go back to your last question, you know, one of the issues with TANF is that there's state-required maintenance of effort, MOE, that in 1996, Congress said, hey, we're going to give you this block grant, but you're also going to have to keep spending money on the truly needy. We're going to make sure you keep helping. Well, right now, MOE can also be accrued at the state level through non-government spending, through some private nonprofits, which is another, it's just a confusing, unclear and unnecessary way to do that MOE process. So I just wanted to mention that lack of transparency on that front and kind of undermines what the MOE does. I think keeping eligibility for non-cash assistance side to under some threshold, if 200% of federal poverty, that's a good benchmark, but you look at the food stamp program, it's 185% is often the upper limit. Medicaid is 133% of the federal poverty level. So anything in that range would make sure that those funds that are outside of cash loaded onto an EBT card, anything that's funding a program, a service, another part of government is going to the poorest, those in poverty in the state, I think would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.